Just for background, we are a 10th grade biology class and we've been going through an ecology unit. So we have sort of talked about food webs and trophic cascade, and these are all terms that you guys are familiar with. Don't worry, the activity won't draw on that too much for my non-science people. So the topic for today is top-down control of trophic cascades. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at a case study to sort of draw this out a little bit. So we're looking at gray wolves in the United States, and our learning targets for today are: I can apply my knowledge of community ecology to understand real-world situations, and I can discuss literature in the context of ecology. So this is kind of drawing on our understanding of ecology and kind of spreading it out into the rest of our lives. So a little bit of background on this particular case study is we'll start with colonization and westward expansion, kind of people populating the U.S. We should know this from our history classes. But basically this meant that, first of all, there was livestock introduced to the U.S., and that was easy prey for wolves because they're domesticated. That angered farmers and settlers, and so they started to just sort of kill them at will. And another problem for the wolves was settling caused depletion of their natural prey species. So these settlers and farmers were killing off the wolves and kind of making these arguments that their livestock was more important than the wolves. And so in 1906, the government began a sanctioned wolf extermination program. And although Leopold, he goes on to dedicate his life's work to conservation, but for a while he worked for the Forest Service in this program in particular. And that is when he wrote the particular passage that we're going to be reading today. And so basically the effect of this was that by the mid-1900s, gray wolves were basically gone from the lower 48 states. So I have a map here of their historical range. As you can see, it's pretty much the whole thing except for coastal California for some reason. I haven't gotten into that, but maybe we can talk about that later. And then by 1960, they're basically gone. This is their recolonized range. So they're starting to come back down a little bit from Canada over here in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or Michigan, I guess, but pretty much they're gone. So we are going to do a jigsaw to kind of read through this passage. Mostly I want to see if jigsaws work for breaking up one passage rather than having multiple different articles that you guys read. So I kind of broke it up as best I could. And so I want you to form groups of 3 at your tables, and then we'll divide from there. But before we divide, I want to talk about summarize and discuss. Summarize, I know we've talked about in previous classes, and discuss, I know you guys all know what it is, we've all done it, but I kind of want to break it down so that we can have goals in mind for when we're working through our jigsaw. So if you guys want to turn to your tables and talk about what these words mean, and maybe write a few definitions up on the board, or just keep them in your head and then we'll bring them back together. You guys can have about a minute or 2 to do that.
Okay, so summarizing.
Picking out the main points.
Yeah.
The gist of the passage.
Yeah, the gist.
Not that one.
No. It's J, right?
G. G-I-S-T.
Okay. Discuss. Talk about our thoughts?
Yeah, you could also do it through writing it, right?
That's true. Put your thoughts into words.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to summarize.
Put thoughts into words. Wow.
I'm really proud of that.
I had some pretty good thoughts, and it sounds like most of the conversations are kind of moving on. So, if I can have a volunteer, tell me what you got for a summarize in your group. Anyone? Dan?
We talked about, it's kind of like briefly stating the main ideas of what you've just read.
Perfect, yeah. And what about discuss? Anyone?
said putting your thoughts into words.
Putting your thoughts into words. Can anyone stand on that?
Talking about it, so not writing it down, but verbal discourse.
Discourse. Good, that's a good word, because we're putting our thoughts into words as a group, right, and sharing our thoughts. So I just wrote a few, just a real brief definitions for these. So you guys all got this, main idea and supporting details, that's good. And then discuss, you kind of break it apart and look at it and create meaning as a group, which is kind of what you guys got to. All right, so I'm gonna pass out, well, actually I'm gonna have you guys assign yourselves numbers within your groups. So you're gonna have a 1, a 2, and a 3. And then once you've done that, go ahead. Everyone, numbers? Okay, so ones, if you're a 1, come to this packet and grab 1 sheet. If you are a 2, come up here and grab 1. And if you are a 3, come to this table. And when you grab your sheet, stay at that table and read at that table.
Right as you said that.
We're mixing up a little bit, and you'll go back to your groups when we're done. And I have two post-it notes
Yeah,
for
me
each
too.
person. If you want to write your thoughts or your summaries down. Sorry.
You know, like,
Where's one?
I believe this is one. Yeah, I think it's
So do we come to the one table?
If you're a 1, come to the 1 table. If you're a 2, come to the 2 table.
you just came to the table and didn't grab the paper.
So I'm just going to do it.
Come on, guys.
We're
just reading?
That.
What do we do with post notes?
Seems like we're a little uneven. Are you a 3?
We have a 3 acting for 2 groups.
Okay, that's fine. That'll work. Okay, so you guys have about 1 or 2 minutes to read to yourselves and summarize. And passage 2 is a little bit longer, so if you just want to skim it, that's fine too.
Whoa.
But just get a main idea for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and then as you're finishing up and making your own summary, briefly talk with your table about that summary and kind of come to a collective agreement. Doesn't have to be exact, but just talk about it a little bit. 30 seconds to a minute.
I said, man kills wolf and man feels bad about it. What summary?
And it was men. There were
Men.
more than one, right?
Oh yeah, we.
And there were several wolves.
Yeah, true.
also. So men killed wolves.
Men.
And they really did. I mean, they knew. They thought they were doing. He realized
Yeah.
that what he thought he was doing was good, but wasn't.
Yeah, because they were like, oh, then we'll have more deer.
Right.
Or actually, it's some more bad things to do.
Did anyone have a slightly different summary than what these two had?
I was thinking it was just really sad.
This said, yeah. Okay, well, as soon as all the tables are done and you feel like they have a pretty good summary, basically your discussions are just to make sure that we're all sort of on the same track. You can gather back up with your groups, 1, 2, 3, and go in order and explain your summaries to the rest of your group. And then we're gonna, as you go through, you're gonna answer these 2 discussion questions or talk about them. You don't have to answer them explicitly, but just talk about those, have that in mind, and then we'll come back together and talk about it as a whole. Back to my group. Okay. I just realized, why did you have 1 It's symmetric.
One.
The arms.
Yeah.
Our summary.
They have muscles. Like the Basically, it's
Alright, one.
talking about
Start.
how only the mountain, I guess, really understands the importance of the wolf. It was like from the perspective of the mountain, and saying that, you know, it was there originally and really sorry. You're distracted by the camera.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's really in
It's
your
like
face.
getting closer.
Are you sure to pick up what you're saying?
Okay. So for 2, so there are men who kill wolves, and then, men kill wolves, and then they feel bad about it afterwards because they originally thought that killing the wolves was good because it would mean more deer, but then they realized that wolves have lives too.
What does, for reading number 1, what does it mean to think like a mountain? I didn't pick that up.
Oh, I was just saying that it was basically saying only the mountain really understands the importance of the wolf because the mountain was there originally before they
Kind of
humans.
a metaphor,
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
So mine built off all you guys since I was the last one. Basically what it said is the wolf affects the deer affects the mountain. And man has been killing the wolves, and so it kind of echoes the food chain we've established when man came. And what it hopes to drive home in its last paragraph is that wildness is the salvation, so maybe it's better if we don't influence, because there's unknown effects we have on nature.
Okay. So, in the context of ecology, what does it mean to think like a mountain? So I think that last sentence we just said kind of answers it like, not disrupting the food chain and the natural life cycle.
He also says we strive for things.
Okay. How can this help inform our views of changing ecosystems and goals?
Conservation is a good thing.
Yes. If you're just thinking from the perspective of nature and the mountain.
Maybe that's a 1906 term for peace.
Yeah. Instead of thinking from the perspective of humans. Or even thinking in perspective of the deer, because they were thinking that killing the wolves would benefit the deer, but then your passage said the deer affects the mountain, and so then everything affects each other. Yeah. So we should really just stay out of nature.
Okay guys, we're gonna start wrapping up these sessions by talking about the questions on the boards. We're gonna come back together as a group in about 1 minute.
You were wolves born here.
I concur with you.
That was a really good discussion group.
Yeah.
We don't have to write them.
So we wrote it on
If
the
he calls
board.
on us.
Oh,
Can you repeat
what are we
that?
writing?
I think. I heard her read.
Sorry, Susanna, it's right on the board. You don't have to. You can if it helps you kind of organize.
And I'll be your
yourself.
We're good.
I'll just repeat the last thing you said.
Okay guys, let's wrap it up and kind of talk as a larger group and see if we all kind of ended up with the same sort of thought. Does anyone want to volunteer a thought about what it means to think like a mountain? Anyone? Becky?
We thought that it means like seeing things like a mountain exists for a really long time, so it's looking at the ecosystem as a whole, like from a balance over the long term.
Awesome. Yeah, ecosystem as a whole. That's a huge thing. Anyone else have any different perspectives or things to add? Everyone was sort of on the same page with that? Thumbs up if yes? Mm-hmm. Yes.
I guess we said that thinking like a mountain, like the mountain was there first, so kind of similar to Becky,
Yeah.
but
Cool, he was there first, he's been there longer, you kind of can have a objective perspective, right? So how can this help us inform our views of changing ecosystems and conservation goals? Yes.
So from the article we learned everything affects each other. For example, the wolf affected the deer affected the mountain. And so what we learned is that leaving nature alone and not interfering is a good thing because we don't have that outside long-term perspective.
Good, yeah. Anyone else have anything to add? No? Okay, good. Well, that's a great segue into our next couple lessons. We're going to be talking about ecosystems management, and that is looking at an ecosystem in a complete form. So a lot of times, as we saw from this essay, humans sort of go with the short term, what's good for them now, And what we're realizing as